Hi everyone, my name is Shazia Khan, and today's unit we'll be doing is 3.30, which is academic and research skills for law. And we'll be looking at learning outcome 3 today, which is to be able to take effective notes from a variety of sources. So what I want to do first is just give you an overview of what we did in the last session, which was learning outcome 2, which was to know how to research information using primary and secondary methods. We outlined the process for carrying out primary research from different sources, and we outlined the process for carrying out secondary research. We looked at what primary research is and identified that it was primary research that is carried out collected through original or first-hand research. We looked at primary data collection, things such as in-depth interviews, surveys, focus groups, social media monitoring, and we also identified the advantages and disadvantages of primary sources. We then went on to look at secondary data and looked at what secondary data is in regards to sources such as reports, trade reports, books, journals, and also identified government publications, research papers, and also identified the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data. We also looked at the market research data for both primary and secondary data. Now we're going to go on to be able to take effective notes from a variety of sources. So we'll be covering note that key points of information for a variety of sources using active listening skills and reading strategies, paraphrase and summarize the information, and using OSCOLA referencing system. So 3.1, note key points of information from a variety of sources using active listening skills and reading and strategies. So listening is the most important communication skill. We probably spend more time using our listening skills than any other skill. Like other skills, listening takes practice. Real listening is an active process, and listening requires attention. Listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. Listening is the key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are normally misunderstood. As a result, communication breaks down, and the sender of the message can easily become frustrated or irritated. If there's one communication skill you should aim to master, then listening is the one. Listening is so important that many top employers provide listening skills training for their employees. This is not surprisingly when you consider that good listening skills can lead to better customer satisfaction, greater productivity with fewer mistakes, and increased sharing of information, and in turn can lead to more creative and innovative work. Many successful leaders and entrepreneurs credit their success to effective listening skills. Richard Branson frequently quotes listening as one of the main factors behind the success of Virgin Media. Percentage of daily communication. So writing, we have 9%, reading, we have 16%, and then speaking is 30%. And as we can see, the highest 45% is listening. And that's why it's so important to identify any sort of issues of listening and to make sure that what you listen to is effective, and it is the most important skill that underpins all positive human relationships. The learning pyramid. So we've got the learning pyramid here. The first one is the lectures, average student retention rate. So lectures, 10% reading, 20% audio visual, 30% demonstration, 50% discussion, 75% of practice doing, and 90% of teaching, teach others. So we're going to go through this pyramid and identify the elements of this pyramid and what this pyramid does. Okay, so the learning pyramid, and certain studies have showed that varying your study methods and materials will improve your retention and recall of information and enhance your learning experience. The learning pyramid, sometimes referred to as the cone of learning, developed by the National Training Laboratory, suggests that most students only remember about 10% of what they read from textbooks, but retain nearly 90% of what they learn through teaching others. The learning pyramid model suggests that some methods of study are more effective than others, and that varying study methods will lead to deeper learning and a longer term retention. The learning pyramid recognizes the different learning methods and evaluates their percentage effectively in terms of learning retention. This is displayed visually as a pyramid, but broken down as follows. So as we mentioned, 5% of lecture. This is defined as the most passive form of learning, as a student sits back and receives this with no requirement to display any understanding or application of the knowledge. However, it is the most effective way to deliver a lot of information to the students quickly. The next one on the pyramid is reading, 10% retention. Although still passive, reading is considered a slightly more effective mode of learning, in that a student can regularly refer back to the material as reference and can also potentially highlight key sections of learning. The next one is audio-visual, and that's 20% of retention. With the growth of digital technology and digital learning, this is increasingly common mode of learning. Although still defined as passive learning, it is considered more effective in that it incorporates other learning elements. It is most often still a lecture, but using visual tools, pictures, handouts, flip charts, slideshows, projections, and videos, which are considered to enhance learning retention. Then we have on the pyramid 30% of demonstration. Demonstration is considered the first active method of learning in the learning pyramid. In short, it means a teacher showing a student something on a practical step-by-step basis. A common working example is teaching how to change a flat tire. It is much more effective to show this in practice than to simply describe the process. The next one on the pyramid is 50% of discussion, which is 50% retention. This is sometimes also referred to as a cooperative learning. This involves a larger group being broken up in smaller groups to actively engage with the subject. Listening to others, giving their interpretation of learning, allows an individual to consider their own understanding of the subject. This develops their critical thinking and deepens their knowledge retention. The next one on the learning pyramid is the practice doing, which is 75%. This might also be referred to as hands-on experience. It is considered as one of the most effective learning methods, as it allows an individual to apply their knowledge in practice. Practical application helps to recall information in the long term, and it leads to deeper critical thinking and understanding of knowledge, and therefore higher learning retention. Returning to the flat tire as an example, in terms of knowledge retention, it is even more effective to practice changing a tire oneself than to watch a demonstration of the process. And then the final one is teaching, teach others, and which is 90% retention. This is considered the highest method of learning retention on the learning pyramid. In order to pass on knowledge to others, an individual must have a thorough understanding of the concepts and details around the subject, and are therefore easily able to recall it. It's also considered that the act of engaging with students and responding to questions deepens an individual's critical thinking and cements their knowledge retention. In practice, much teaching and education will actually blend or build the different methods of learning listed in the pyramid and not focus only on one form. A lecture, for example, may develop to group discussion and the practice of doing. The learning pyramid helps highlight the value of different forms of learning and provides a framework for the design of educational content. Active listening. What is active listening? So active listening requires you to listen attentively to a speaker, understand what they're saying, respond and reflect on what's being said, and retain the information for later. keeps both listener and speaker actively engaged in the conversation, and it's an essential building block of compassionate leadership. So active listening, ask open-ended questions, request clarification, be attentive. So make sure you listen, you're showing that you are attentive. Summarize, paraphrase, reflect feelings, be attuned. Active listening, 10 tips to improve your listening skills. So tip 1 is to stay focused. Stay focused, listen. Identify that you're able to, focus on what is being said. Tip 2, detect emotions. Tip 3, ask questions. It's important you ask questions. Tip 4, don't interrupt. Tip 5, don't preempt. Tip 6, recap key facts. Tip 7, pen and paper at the ready. Tip 8, say it again. And tip 9, watch the stereotypes. And tip 10 is be aware of the listening barriers. So these are the tips that you need in regards to improve your listening skills. So taking notes, another important skill that you need. Taking notes combines the art of listening and the act of selective writing. It is a skill that can be mastered. You will have many opportunities to practice this important skill, which can help you in your professional life. Note-taking can help to focus your attention on what you are reading, watching, or listening, and to stop your mind from wandering. They can also help you make sense of what you are learning, and when working on a piece of writing, such as an essay or report, they are a good way of getting all your ideas and your evidence together. Taking notes is about helping you to get organized, stay focused, remember key points, and study effectively for tests. It's not about recording every word a teacher says or everything an expert writes. If you try that, you'll be more focused on taking notes than on understanding the material. Example of good note taking: start each lecture on a new page and day and number each page. Leave blank spaces. This allows you to add comments or note questions later. Use acronyms and symbols. Avoid detailed notes. So use abbreviations. Note all unfamiliar vocabulary or concepts you don't understand. This reminds you to look up them later. The type of notes you make will often depend on the subject matter. For example, if you are studying a maths or science subject, then short, concise notes may be all that is needed, perhaps on index cards. However, notes for literature or psychology subject, for example, could require more detail, and references to theories may be needed. Written notes are not always needed, and sometimes using highlighter pens on a handout or textbook can work well instead. Visual notes such as diagrams and mind maps work well for some people, or a mixture of written and visual notes could be used effectively. There are 3 effective note-taking methods. First one is the Cornell method, which was developed by a Cornell University education professor in the 1940s. The Cornell method simplifies the note-taking and the test preparation. This method encourages the note-taker to be an active listener and critical thinker. Second one is the mapping method. If you're more of a visual learner, then the mapping method will be one for you. And since it relies on graphics and structures to connect key ideas, in this method, you start with a key phrase that identifies the main topic. Place that phrase in a box or bubble in the center of your page. This method works best if your page is in landscape orientation, and then you draw a line from a topic and write down phrases and summarize the first main fact. And this identifies what areas you need to identify for that assignment or subject area. The last one is outline or bullet method. If you're a highly structured approach or you're already skilled at outlining, then the outline bullet method may be ideal for you. This is particularly effective note-taking technique for those who think linearly and are detail oriented. Using indents, numbers and letters, or indents and bullets, this note-making method organizes your notes in a logical, easy to scan hierarchy with the outline method. So 3.2, paraphrase and summarize your information. Paraphrasing is restarting text, giving the meaning in another form. You essentially rewrite the text in your own words. Paraphrasing is required so that it doesn't look like your work is plagiarized. It shows that you have read and understand the original text and its meanings. Paraphrasing is not substituting a few words or rearranging sentences. Think what the original writer is trying to say and write a completely new sentence if you can. If there's a key phrase well expressed by the original writer, then use it as a short, direct quotation. Paraphrasing shows the reader that what you think about the source material or how it fits into your work. It is academically unacceptable to create a long paraphrase from a source and simply put a reference citation at the end. Paraphrasing example. So you've got the original text there, which says, Bill Murray was famous for his delicious sandwiches. Children and adults love to eat it. If you paraphrase that in your own words, you put Bill Murray was known across UK for his sandwiches and people enjoyed his delicacies every time. So it paraphrased it. It's not the same. So you wouldn't be done for any sort of plagiarism or copying. So from the original text, we've paraphrased that word to make it actually seem like the same thing from the original text. Summarizing. So key extracts from the main content. When you summarize, you reduce the amount of text. You should use only important ideas from the text, so focus on key points and makes use of effective paraphrasing. There is an art to good summarizing. Keep in mind that your purpose is to use the source material by tying the ideas in the summary to the general point you are making. Summarizing is the best way to show your voice and convince the reader you understand what you are talking about. For both paraphrasing and summarizing, you must indicate the source with an in-text reference and provide full details of the source in your reference list. When summarizing, ask these questions. What things will help me summarize this text? So list, mind map, note taking, etc. What are the main ideas and significant details from listening and reading? If you were to tell the other person about the content, how would you do it? And what is the main theme? How can you relate to it in a practical world? 3.3, using the Scholar referencing system. So firstly, we'll look at what Scholar is. Scholar is a referencing style published by the Oxford Standard for Citation of Legal Authorities. Scholar is a numerically footnoted referencing style. It uses footnotes for citations in the body of your writing, which are identified by superscript number, usually at the end of a sentence after the full stop. So Scholar stands for Oxford University Standard for the Citation of Legal Authorities. And there's a diagram and also a link there to go to the law.ox research subject to identify any sort of research you need around Scholar. The key rules of Scholar. Scholar does not claim to be comprehensive, but gives rules and examples for the main UK legal primary sources and for main types of secondary sources. When citing materials not mentioned in Scholar, use the general principles as a guide. Try to maintain consistency. Scholar uses a lot of abbreviations. Titles of journals and court names are always abbreviated. Scholar also rules that there is no punctuation between letters in an abbreviation. Footnote referencing style. So footnotes are what they sound like, a note, which appears at the foot of a page. In a footnote referencing system, you indicate a reference by putting a small number above the line of type directly following the source material. So references are indicated by a superscript number 1, 2, or 3, as we mentioned within the text, normally at the end of the sentence. The reference are given back in a corresponding footnote at the bottom foot of the page 2, like a small number 2. So number 1, superscript numbers are smaller and set above the normal text. And number 2, compared to endnotes, references given at the end of the document. Inserting a footnote in Word. So how to insert a footnote in Word? You position your cursor at the end of the sentence after the punctuation. You click on the references menu in Word, which is at the top, and then you click on the insert footnote, not insert citation. And then you type the reference in the corresponding footnote. So you would type it there, and then it would come at the bottom of the page. And it would be clear where you've got your reference from for you. So for example, if you had to cite a case, you would click the reference menu in Word. First, you would position your cursor near the case. And then if you had to fully cite the case, you would put, for example, Smith and Hughes, and then you would put the year of the case. But if you had to put it in the reference, you would put the full citation. So you'd put Smith and Hughes 2012 QLR 34316, which is Queen's Bench or wherever it's from, and you would fully cite that in the footnote. So it identifies that the full citation of the case is in the footnotes, and the basic is in the main text. But you need to make sure you do this when you are doing your assignment. So bibliography. This is a list of sources that you have used and everything that you have cited in your work, and other sources that you might have consulted during the research but have chosen not to cite in the assignment. Whether you are asked to provide a reference list or bibliography, both should provide accurate and references. So you'd have a complete list of sources cited in your work. Tables of authorities, so primary sources could be things like cases and legislation, and they need to be fully cited, and they need to obviously identify that the sources are there, and the dates and the reference is done in the right way. Bibliography, secondary sources, books and articles with the Harvard referencing system that is used. For UK Varsity, you need to copy and paste references from footnotes to bibliography, and you need to change author from first name, surname to initial. A couple of things that a bibliography accomplishes is like showing your instructor that you conducted the necessary research for your assignment, crediting your sources, authors for the research they make, and making it easy for anybody who reads your work to find the sources you've used and conduct their own research on the same or similar subject. Additionally, consulting using a bibliography identifies your academic work and helps researchers understand the information that has been cited. So bibliography, this is an example. So you've got table of authorities, primary sources, cases, legislation, statutes, statutory instruments. So cases list A to Z by party name, legislation sort by statutes, and list A to Z by legislation title. The bibliography, books, chapters, journal articles, and internet. So the secondary sources sort by resource type, e.g. books, chapters, articles, list A to Z by author's name, then by publication date. So it needs to be in chronological order. Bibliography, another example. So table of authorities is a list of all the cases fully cited, statutes with the dates on, statutory instruments with the dates and the sections on. The bibliography, so the way the bibliography is done in regards to what you are expected to use, Harvard system, numerical system, and this is how a bibliography would look, an example of it. Quotations. A quotation is the exact words of someone else. When you like what someone said, put their quotation in your writing. Quotations are a big part of writing. People use quotations when something is well said. A quotation from someone famous or smart can help make your own point sound better. When you use a quotation, always remember to put it in quotation marks and give proper credit. Also, don't change the words. A quotation should be exactly what the person has said or wrote. So short quotes up to 3 lines in text with single quotation mark, long quotes over 3 lines, indent, paragraph and no quotation marks. Give page numbers for both direct quotations and paraphrasing, and pinpoint page paragraph numbers at the end of the footnotes. For other referencing styles, you've got the 4th edition of Oscola, that's there, so you can refer to that for the University of Oxford. Thank you for attending today's session, and thank you for your patience, and I will see you in the next session.